I think we ought to read only the kind of books that wound or stab us. If the book doesn't wake us up with a blow to the head, what are we reading for? We need books that affect us like a disaster, like the death of someone we loved more than ourselves. A book must be the axe for the frozen sea within us. That is from a letter that Franz Kafka wrote to a friend in 1904. Axe, Stories That Cut Deep. Published by Heresy Press this July, was born of the director Bernard Schweitzer sending that Kafka quote out to a select group of established writers, hoping that it would inspire them to submit something that, in his words, would quite likely meet with rejection by the average mainstream editor. I agree that the average mainstream editor tends to publish literature that freezes the sea within us further. Kudos to Heresy Press for trying to send fissures through it. As I rank the 14 pieces in this book, a dozen short stories and 2 essays, I will take into consideration the book's premise. But I will put quality first. If a story breaks my heart, that is axe enough for me, generally speaking, but not always. The least impressive stories in acts are written by the most celebrated writers, and the book boasts quite a roster of renowned talent, as you will soon see, since I will be ranking my favorites in reverse order. But be patient, because the 2 best pieces in the book also happen to be written by heavy hitters. Last week I reviewed Nothing Sacred, Outspoken Voices in Contemporary Fiction, published by Heresy Press in 2023, to showcase, let's say, nascent and unheralded talent. I was impressed by 8 out of the 12 pieces in that book, giving it a batting average of 666. Let's see how Axe, with its all-star lineup, measures up. Let's see if it outperforms it. Where I'm Coming From by David Sedaris. David Sedaris is one of the best and most popular comic writers of our time. He writes masterfully about his wacky family. The last I heard, he was regularly publishing for The New Yorker. The problem with signing a titan like this is that Heresy Press probably can't pay his going rate. If the press did fork over the dollars, then it got ripped off. Perhaps Sedaris thinks that just lending his name to the project is favor enough. His story, or sketch really, was pulled from something originally posted on Twitter. It's a send-up of white woke culture and virtue signaling in an upscale town, narrated by a half-indoctrinated, half-cynical college kid home for break. It's got a few good gags in it, but that's it. It's a lark. It's not literature. I would not have included it. What I Learned Over My Summer Vacation by Chuck Palahniuk. From Palahniuk's novel Fight Club and his short story Guts and much of his other work, we know that he is not afraid to rock the boat. I'd say that he errs on the side of rocking it too much, or rocking it for the sake of rocking it. His story pushes boundaries content-wise. A high school kid from a low-income family is lured to Thailand for a paid overseas internship for $30 an hour. We can imagine what that internship entails. The story is written in the form of a what I did over the summer essay for his high school English teacher, with an ending that I saw coming, but which was clearly meant to surprise me. The story touches on a relevant subject, how sexual adventurism and near child prostitution has become almost normalized with the newer generations, but the writing is, in a word, uninspired. The characters in the story just never come alive. How to Doomproof Your Reading, an essay by Junot Diaz. As the afterword to this book, it defends the practice of reading outside of our comfort zones. Diaz believes that if we read hungrily, adventurously, blasphemously, and with the future in mind, we might just keep society from collapsing. Reads a bit too much like a bumper sticker to me. Diaz does something interesting in how he lists adjectives to describe the reading experience and then attaches each of these adjectives with a footnote to a writer's name. It's an excellent idea, but it's half-heartedly executed. I mean, just the writer's name? Diaz is a Pulitzer Prize winner. He wrote a gutsy autobiographical essay on abuse titled The Silence. What if he had given us his all instead of something just dashed off? You know, reading the 4 most unremarkable pieces in this book made me feel grateful to be an unknown writer, because known writers risk having their mediocrities snapped up. At least I can rest assured that no one will publish or will want to publish my duds in my unfinished work. A confidential portrait of the Fields Medalist as a young boy by Joyce Carol Oates. An excerpt from her forthcoming novel, My Lost One. What small press editor is going to tell the legendary Joyce Carol Oates that her submission doesn't measure up? Look, it's competent, but the reader wants Joyce Carol Oates at her best, and we don't get anything close to that. With workmanlike prose of forced intensity, she shows us a washed-up soprano who, with cruelty and brutality, tries to teach her son without talent how to play the piano. Am I being overly harsh? Did all the big names on the cover of Acts get my hopes too high? Maybe. Maybe Oates' excerpt works better as part of a whole. Pavane for A Prince of the Air by Elizabeth Hand. A pavane is a type of dance. The story, the longest in the book, is flush with atmospheric and period detail, describing the heart-wrenching decline in health of a hippie king and his wife's despairing attempts to understand it. Written from the perspective of a writer friend, perhaps a stand-in for Hand herself, it seems to commemorate an old friend and an old way of life. It reads very mainstream to me, gushing with a yearning sentimental sheen. Perhaps a present-day gatekeeper would reject it, thinking that the boomers already had their say. I don't know. Although it's not my cup of tea, Hand clearly gave it her all. She's not just dialing it in. The Client by Richard North Patterson. Patterson, an internationally best-selling novelist, stopped publishing fiction in the mid-20-teens and became a frequent political pundit on mainstream TV. Although his novels never shied away from controversial issues, gun violence, reproductive rights, the Israel-Palestine conflict, his story in this book is inoffensively heartwarming. An honest small-town lawyer from the South inspires great loyalty in his protege, who ends up inheriting his business. The story has clear villains and heroes and is very satisfying to read. It's deftly written, it's got wonderful surface charm, but it doesn't seem to fit with the Kafka quote, unless writing short stories about well-off white people in the South who don't seem especially haunted by the sins of their fathers is considered controversial these days. Ava by Jonathan Santlofer. Santlofer, a best-selling writer of literary thrillers and also a painter whose work hangs in important museums, tells us a tale about a New York artist, past his prime, although still making a living with his work, who embarks on an artistic and sexual adventure with a young, mysterious artist's model. The story has some excellent scenes of the narrator overcoming sexual impotence through artistic creation. The voice, seamless from one line to the next, engrossed me. Santlofer also concocted some fascinating narrative strands, which he unfortunately either tied up too neatly or left hanging, which I find happens too often in genre fiction. Propaganda by Andrew Doyle. Doyle, an Irish journalist, playwright, and political satirist, created the famous spoof Twitter account Titania McGrath, which skewers woke culture. His short story about a literary artist's paranoia as he immerses himself in his work, trying to please the committee rooms, is laugh out loud funny. It takes place in a hotel room, as the narrator reports a theft and then has to contend with the hotel staff's infuriating corporate speak and powers of deflection. Its absurdism reminded me of Nikolai Gogol's The Nose. If I were being really picky, I would say that the story stops rather than ends, although it stops on a very humorous note. Am I Blue? An essay by Alice Walker. Walker, of The Color Purple fame, was the first black woman to win the Pulitzer Prize for literature. Am I Blue, first published in Ms. magazine in 1986, starts out as a lyrical essay about living in this country house with a field in front that's occupied by this lone white horse named Blue, to whom Walker feeds apples from an adjacent orchard. Blue, in his solitude, seems content with this little bit of affection and attention from Walker, until a brown mare is put in the field with him and Blue is transformed. He appears to fall in love, eating Walker's apples with more detachment now beside his brown mare. Then the brown mare is taken away and Blue is left disconsolate. Apples no longer interest him. It's a heartbreaking portrait. But then Walker veers off into this essay about human cruelty, or more precisely, about the cruelty of white adults toward the other, whether the other is a different race or mail order brides who can't speak English, or grown-ups, or animals. In the end, it's the strongest possible statement for animal rights. Man or woman, white or black, grown-up or child, animal or human, we all deserve the same rights and respect. That seems to be Walker's point. without much development or intellectual buttressing, to be honest. Walker seems to just throw her idea out there with all her heart, leaving others to criticize or substantiate it. Good for her. Why not? The Eighth Sacrament by James Morrow. It might be the most blithely blasphemous story that I've ever read. Morrow ties Christ's words in Matthew chapter 19, verse 14, "Suffer little children, forbid them not to come unto me," to pedophilia in the Catholic Church. And he does it within an invented historical context, so credible that it sent me to the internet afterward to see if it could possibly be true. It reads like historical fiction, but its wicked cleverness, its unsparing skewering of the Catholic Church, in how slippery theology becomes when interpreted by the higher-ups, is worth the price of admission. What readers perhaps hope to get from Chuck Palahniuk, they get in spades from Morrow. Morrow, by the way, has written the Godhead trilogy, which, according to Wikipedia, was spun from the premise that God has died and left behind a 2-mile-long corpse. Miss Pretty by Bradford Morrow. Bradford Morrow has won both the Pushcart and O. Henry prizes for short fiction, and this story lives up to what those laurels once meant. It's a macabre tale, told by the daughter of a bird woman who once traveled the country as the star attraction of a freak show, an undignified career that nonetheless gave her a certain measure of fame and wealth and a kind of twisted glamour. Through torturous operations, she tries to force these same monstrous defects on her daughter, who narrates after returning to her childhood home where these operations once took place with her own daughter. The prose is delectable, and the ending gave me an unexpected, chilling surprise. Just first rate. And the ending, like the ending of all great stories, is not neat so much as just right. The Book Life by Jeffery Ford. Ford has published 8 short story collections, according to his website, so he's got experience. He's loose. He's not confined by the form. His story is quirky, personal, filled with surprises, incorporating what seem to be everyday autobiographical anecdotes with other anecdotes that can't possibly be true. Fantastical autofiction, maybe. The story rambles but doesn't. It's hard to explain why it works, which is part of its magic. Perhaps the voice is the liquid cement. Straight talking, always likable, never overtly literary. It follows Ford as he is pursued all his life by the great short story collection Winesburg, Ohio by Sherwood Anderson. Although I never completely bought into that conceit, I was beguiled. The best short stories beguile. The New Member by Lionel Shriver. Shriver, a great podcast guest, is one of the few contemporary fiction writers who has not only never tempered herself to appease the gatekeepers of mainstream publishing, but has willfully provoked them with her politically incorrect questions about euthanasia, immigration, obesity, school shootings, to name just a few of the topics that Shriver has explored with her novels. In this story, she takes on trans issues. The new member of an all-women swimming club in an upscale New England town turns out to have a member. Wink, wink. The irony is delicious. And what's more, Shriver, with her fiction, with the dialogue between her characters, gives real insight into the foolishness that the temper of the times has baked into this issue. Really solid satire, inspired satire. And I'll tell you what, it is impressive how well this woman describes a penis. The Short, Happy Life of Robert Polatkin by Sherman Alexie. Alexie and Shriver are the two big cheeses in this book who really bring it. Alexie's short story takes the cake because it moved me. The title is a clear allusion to Ernest Hemingway's masterpiece of short fiction, The Short, Happy Life of Francis Macomber, in which a hunting expedition brutally resolves some marital bickering. In Alexie's story, which holds its own against the story he alludes to, a Native American astronomy professor returns to the reservation after deciding that college students and administration are too bullying with their ideas about education. Once back at the res, he has to face everything that he ran away from there. An embittered girlfriend, her self-induced abortion of their child, his repulsion toward guns, and his incompetence shooting elk. The ending lifted off the page like no other story in the book. It took my breath away. So, tallying up, I was impressed by 9 out of 14 of the pieces in Acts, giving it a batting average of 643. So, Nothing Sacred, with its spotlight on new talent, hit for better average, while Acts, with its spotlight on veteran talent, racked up more hits. If I could put together a book of all-stars, I would choose 11. The top 5 from Acts and the top 6 from Nothing Sacred. That collection might have made it into Book Rants Hall of Fame.
A quick reminder, to support the cause, you can always like, comment, or follow, or if my passion and insights about literature make you curious about my own attempts at it, there is always My Half Orange, a story of love and language in Seville, published by Tortoise Books in 2023, about the 10 most transformative years of my life when I moved from New York City to Seville, Spain in 2005, met a local woman, and started a family with her without hardly speaking Spanish. I plan to soon upload an audio version to Substack, Rants from a Foreign Land, John Julius Reel. Follow me there to receive all my updates by email. Thanks, good people.